He kōna I purangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
They say life is stranger than fiction.
There are these kind of materials which are called piezoelectric that can change their mechanical properties by applying electrical currents.
But sometimes what we see in movies or read in books is so incredible that it obviously couldn't be possible. Or could it?
If you can combine it with these rigidity capabilities of polymeric materials or polymerics combined with piezoelectric materials, then you could have the best of both worlds. You can have them flexible when the material is not being excited by an electric current, and when he needs to jump off the top of a building, he could just press a button, have a current go through the material will become rigid, and he can use it as a wingsuit.
I'm Bryan Crump, and welcome to Sci-Fi Sci-Fact. This is a podcast where we take science fiction's strangest ideas, weirdest elements, and most unfeasible plot drivers and explore if they actually could happen. Maybe they already have. And in every episode, we bring in a scientist from New Zealand's MacDiarmid Institute to explain the theories behind some of fiction's more fantastic flights of fancy. If any theory exists.
His true identity, Bruce Wayne, millionaire philanthropist. Robin, in reality, Dick Grayson, orphan and Bruce Wayne's devoted ward. Together, man and boy, a brilliant and courageous team dedicated to crime detection and law enforcement.
Yes, Batman. And here is Rodrigo Martinez Gazoni. He's a postdoctoral research fellow at Canterbury University, and he's also a MacDiarmid Institute research fellow. Now, are you a big Batman fan?
Well, I'm a decent Batman fan. Haven't watched everything, but
as opposed to an indecent. Does that mean you like the original TV series more than the dark adaptations of recent years?
I liked everything that was on TV. I haven't followed the comics that much, but everything that was on TV, that was my aisle. So, yeah.
So the thing about Batman is, say, compared to Superman, it doesn't really seem to have too many superpowers. I mean, he's got all that money, though. So, with that Wayne family that he's from, which means he can build his own atomic power station, at least in the comic book version. I mean, I'm pretty sure even the movie versions, the Batcave is atomic powered. Am I right there, Rodrigo?
Well, I guess that's the great thing about Batman, right? Everyone with sufficient capital could become him. You and I could become Batman if we had enough money.
All we need to be is millionaires, Rodrigo.
Yeah, absolutely. That's all you need. You don't need superpowers.
However, there are some things that he has in his armory which are a little bit fantastical. Yeah,
I guess most of the stuff that he deals with are at the edge of what technology can do. So you can think of from his armor, his suit, the cape that he uses, all the gadget that he has in his tool belt, and things in his cowl. So he has sonar, for instance, in his cowl. He can manipulate the cape so it can change its properties and become soft or hard, or be permeable to water or resistant to fire. And so using technology and material science is kind of what he does.
Now, I'm pretty sure that Batman can't fly through the air. Or can he in some incarnations?
Well, I guess it depends on your definition of flying. He does glide, right? He can use his cape, and the cape, it's quite an interesting gadget that he has in his tools. The cape in particular can change properties, so it can be supple and flexible, so he can move around and use it to cover himself or to deflect hits from criminals or his enemies. But at the same time, he can turn it into something rigid, so he can use it as a paraglider, for instance. And that's quite an interesting approach. And it's quite similar to what some materials can actually do. There are these kind of materials which are called piezoelectric that can change their mechanical properties by applying electrical currents. So the cape is kind of something like that. Presumably it has some molecules that are loosely bound to each other and gives them this flexibility. But at the same time, he just can press a button and apply an electrical current, and all the molecules will align, and the cape will suddenly become rigid. And having a rigid cape will allow him to use it as a paraglider and not fly, but at least control his landing.
That cape, it's normally flapping around quite a lot, right? Is there really something you could do that could make it so tough, so strong that if you fired a bullet at it, it would bounce off?
Well, that's where composite materials come in. When you're developing material science, you work with materials with different properties, and if you're clever enough and you're lucky enough, you can get a specific combination of materials that give you a certain property that has the best of many worlds. So for instance, in the case of the cape, you would need something that is subtle enough and flexible enough so he can just move it around. Polymers would be an adequate approach there. But then you have to have something that can become rigid when you apply an electrical current, for instance, or an external stimuli. There are many ways of doing that in real materials. So piezoelectrics are one of them. So you can combine piezoelectrics with this molecule of organic or polymeric molecules to give flexibility, whereas... Sorry,
Rodrigo, I didn't quite catch that. What kind of electrics?
Oh, so you can have piezoelectric. So piezoelectrics are materials that respond mechanically when you apply an electrical current. Or they can respond electrically when you apply a mechanical force. These materials are used in everyday life, just not in the way that the cape works. So you can find those materials, for instance, in the igniters in kitchens or in the igniters for flames. And you also have them in these singing cards, the singing cards that you open and you start hearing this song. What they do is they apply an electrical current that it's variable and it's to the tune of the song that you want to hear. And the material responds to that current and emits the sound that you want. So you can do the other way around and connect several of these materials with organic polymers. And then when you apply an electrical current, all these materials will expand and they will harden the surface that they end up making.
What's the most transformation we humans are capable of at the moment? Is it something that could be as soft as cotton and then become as hard as steel, or are we a bit of a way off from that?
Yeah, no, that kind of things is done in the lab. I guess as with many things that are done in the lab, the problem at the moment or the limitation is scalability. So it's relatively easy to make them in small sections, but it's hard to scale it up and make it work in larger environments.
What are the main elements used in these? Are they polymers?
Well, it depends. The piezoelectrics are crystals, so they are solids that expand or contract with an electric field or an electric current. But if you were going to go that way, you would need to use polymers to connect these crystal structures that are the piezoelectrics.
What are the crystals usually made of, Rodrigo?
Also, these are arrangements of atoms that are oriented and that are arranged in a specific lattice. Usually they are cubic lattices. They are oriented in very regular arrays.
Any particular element that you need to use?
Not really. So there are some of them that are intrinsically piezoelectric. So zinc oxide, for instance, has zinc and oxide in its lattice. If you put sufficient pressure to it, it will generate an electric field that would translate in an electric current. But there are many, many others that do the same thing. Another approach would be just using, as you said, just polymers and make those polymers so that they can align when you apply a current. And when all those polymers are aligned, they will become tougher and they will become more resistant. So that would be another approach to go.
Yes?
Batman, it's Robin.
Robin, old chum. Where are you?
Ho, ho, ha, ha. Remember me, old chum?
You jolly devil. Harm one hair of that boy's head.
Riddle me twice, Batman. What kind of pins are used in soup?
Terrapins, Batman.
Right?
Very good. What was Joan of Arc made of?
Joan of Arc was...
Made of Orleans.
That's where you'll find him. Happy hunting.
Don't fall for it, Batman. It sounds too easy. I'll get out of this myself the same way I got in.
Robin. Robin! Robin!
I was just thinking about examples of the reverse, where you apply some kind of mechanical pressure and that creates a charge, an electric charge. So, and you use the example of a lighter. So I'm assuming something that creates a spark that I might have in my kitchen if I wanted to light a gas stove.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So the portable lighters that you have, and then you press and you hear a click. What you're doing there is you're applying a force on the crystal, and that crystal accumulates charges, and those charges are discharged and produce that spark.
I always thought it was I always thought that was a friction thing going on there.
Oh, you're thinking about the wheels one. There's one with a wheel and a stone. Yeah.
And
so
that's what we use with the old big fire lighters. Cigarette lighters.
Yep. But there's another kind in which you press and you hear a click. And every time you hear a click is that you're getting this discharge of a charge that are being accumulated due to the pressure that you're putting on the lighter.
Could we use that principle, scale it up and use it to generate electricity that we might use in another way? Given we need quite a lot of electricity from non-fossil fuel sources?
That's a great question. And as I was saying before, the problem is scalability. It's relatively easy to make it in small dimensions. If you needed a huge accumulation of charge just to provide energy to a city or something like that, you would need huge structures, and that it's probably not going to be viable. That being said, I think it was in Sweden in which they paved a sidewalk with these materials, and they are actually using the pressure of people walking through the sidewalk to power. I think it's the light signals on the streets.
Yeah, I mean that would be brilliant, especially in a place like Sweden where you got a winter where it's dark for most of the day.
Yeah,
that's brilliant. It would save you a lot of electricity.
Yep, it would.
Getting back to the other direction, which is an electrical charge on some kind of fabric that makes it really, really tough and maybe even resistant to a bullet. You say scalability. So on the lab at the moment, what have we got? The sheet the size of a postage stamp?
Yeah, probably a little bit bigger than that. So probably around 10 centimeters square. You can still make it.
That would barely cover Batman's privates.
Yeah, that's going to be a problem. And I think the other problem with this kind of materials is the durability. So you can only cycle them so many times before the material completely degrades.
So we've got a situation where the cape, already we've got a lab version of this, a cape that can change form. The other thing I was thinking about was a cape that... Now, would you want to make the cape completely rigid to fly? That actually seems more plausible, using the cape to fly rather than the cape as a shield. Because I'm thinking about those free divers. I don't know what they're actually called. You know, the ones they jump off the edges of cliffs and they have some kind of suit on. They're not paragliding. They've got some kind of suit on that they then fly in. That sounds like what Batman could do.
Yep, it wouldn't be that different, right? So those are wingsuits, and those are attached to the arms and to the legs, so they create a relatively large area that increases the friction with air and then slows down their fall. They're not actually flying, but that being said, they can actually maneuver. So I guess using something like this would allow Batman to maneuver, and he would look like he's flying.
I've seen cam footage on people who've got cameras on their helmets, and it's just amazing what these people do. It is kind of the closest I've seen to humans doing something which I regard as superhuman, even if it's gravity that's powering them. Do you know much about those wingsuits, or is it windsuits? Wing or windsuits, Rodrigo?
It's wingsuits. The wingsuit. It's one of the things that I would love to do, but it's one of the things that my wife wouldn't let me.
Really? Or you might have to sneak up to a high mountain and, in the middle of the night.
Yeah, probably.
Tell them you're going up for a research.
But it's amazing what these people can do. Yeah.
Do you know what they're made of?
Yeah. They're usually made out of the same material that paragliders are made of, because you need them to be very lightweight and relatively flexible, because you need to be able to control what it's called the attack angle, or the relative surface area that you're having in contact with the air on the right side of your body or your left side of your body, and that allows you to maneuver as you fall down.
Say Batman had something like a wingsuit, that's something his cape could do. And maybe he can only fly down from tall buildings, but even then, no, that's quite an advantage and quite an exciting skill. But would the material that you need in order to do this downward gliding then be quite rigid? Would it be a bit cumbersome for you to walk around in?
Well, I guess you could, if you can combine it with this rigidity capabilities of polymeric materials or polymerics combined with piezoelectric materials, then you could have the best of both worlds. You can have them flexible when the material is not being excited by an electric current, and when he needs to jump off the top of a building, he could just press a button, have a current go through the material will become rigid, and he can use it as a wingsuit.
For the Bat Cape to do the kind of things that the Bat Cape does in Batman, how much power is he going to need? A couple of AA batteries, or does he need to plug into his Batmobile?
The good thing about these materials is that they don't constantly consume current. So once you apply the electrical current and they become rigid, the energy consumption is really, really low. So probably they would be good with something that he could carry, an energy source that he could carry on his belt or something like that.
Rodrigo, you know, one of the things about Batman is he's got these pretty fabulous abs, and if you're going to have a bat suit to go to a dress-up party, you've got to have the abs. Is that just the fact that he's got great abs, or is there some kind of body armor going on there?
Well, I guess that's the other advantage of being Batman. You don't actually have to have those abs. You can just have them molded into your armor, and then you would look awesome. I think in every iteration, he actually has the abs. And I think if you're going to fight crime and the bad guys in the way he does, you kind of need to be fit. But that being said, the armor has other properties that are going beyond the aesthetic ones. So the armor itself has to be sufficiently tough to withstand bullets and blows from different kind of weapons. And at the same time, it has to be flexible enough so Batman can move around and actually run or fight his enemies.
Because this is the torso, whatever he's got around his torso, as opposed to the cape, which flaps around behind him. Would it be a body-hugging, really tough but yet light material that this would be made of, that would hug his abs?
Yeah. I guess for the torso, it should be something that it's tough enough that it can withstand blows and bullets if he's being shot. But at the same time, when it joins to the arms and to the legs, it has to be flexible enough so he can move around. So you can think of using, a titanium plate or something on the torso, but that on the other hand would be too heavy. So you need some kind of material that has the best of both worlds. Being heavy is not a good thing, so you need something lightweight. But typically speaking, lightweight things are not that tough to resist impact. So you have to kind of try to find the best combination of both worlds.
My Batman is pretty much the Batman that I think it was Adam West and Burt Ward. I hope I've got the names right, who played Batman and Robin on the TV series. That's my Batman more than anything else that's come since. And one of the things I'm pretty sure he had was some kind of boomerang device that he used to throw up over ledges, and then it had a rope behind it and he'd climb up. Is that your memory too, Rodrigo?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess that Batman was the one who has the most colorful gadgets.
Colorful, right?
Yeah, in every sense of the word. Yeah. It was
full Technicolor.
Really, yeah, absolutely. And it was really fun to watch it. And yeah, but you're right. The Batarang was one of the go-to weapons or tools that he has. And what he used to do is he would have the Batarang tied to a rope, and he would just throw the rope and throw the Batarang, and the Batarang will hooked or tied to something, and then he would use that to climb. In later iterations, that was replaced with a gun that would shoot an arrow tied with a cable, and then he would use that to climb up. But the Batarang is still there, even in the modern iterations. He's no longer using it to tie a rope and climb, but as a weapon to attack his enemies.
Okay, Rodrigo. Well, a couple of obvious questions here. Batarang, boomerang. so we can see where it's come from. First question. Rodrigo, can you tell us why a boomerang comes back?
So it has to do with the shape, both in the plane of the flight and in the direction perpendicular to the flight. If you look at the boomerang sideways, it has a curve on top and a flat end on the bottom. This is typically the way they are. So when you throw them, as they move through the air particles on top have to move faster than the air particles at the bottom, and that creates an upward push, and that produces the lift. That's the same principle that airplanes use to fly. But on the other hand, boomerangs have a twist, and that twist allows them, depending on how pronounced that twist is, that twist makes them cut through the wind or through the air differently on the inner side than on the outer side. So the friction on each side is different, and that produces the curve that you see when you throw them, and that's what produces it to come back to you.
Okay.
I guess you have to be skillful to do it. I've tried throwing them a few times, and I've never been able to catch it.
You've never been able to make it come back. Right. There's a song about that.
You have to be skillful, yeah.
I'm pretty sure there's a song about that from about the time I used to watch Batman and Robin on the television. But Batman, his batarang, I think, can come back. But the thing is, would a batarang do what a boomerang does if a batarang has some rope trailing off the back? Wouldn't that spoil the aerodynamics?
Yeah, probably that wouldn't work. And if you see the new iterations of the batarang, the shape is not adequate for it to come back. But I think that's not the purpose. The purpose is just to throw it like a Chinese star and just to attack his enemies.
Do you know? Because I can't remember if Batman and Robin, or maybe it doesn't even matter whether it's Batman and Robin, the original TV series or later films or the comics, but surely Batman would have had some special hearing abilities, because after all, he named himself after a species that has sonic hearing abilities.
Yeah, absolutely. In many iterations, they hinted that he would use some sort of sonar capabilities to assist his guidance or his vision. I think in one of the latest iterations in the Dark Knight was the most evident one, and the way they propose it there is that he actually uses sonar to create a 3D map of the environment, so he can actually see even if there's no light or anything like that.
How does he do that? Has he got augmented reality in, say, his back goggles or something?
Yeah. So it's a combination of two things. On one hand, you need to have the device that produces the sonar effect, so it produces the sound that would be bouncing from the objects and then collect it again and reconstruct the image. But at the same time, you would need something so he can actually see the reconstructed image. And in the Dark Knight, it's quite an interesting approach. He uses the cell phones of everyone in the city as an emitter, and then those cell phones would presumably emit sound, and that sound would be bouncing off the walls and the environment they're in, and then they would be collected from the environment to their mic, and then somehow that would be translated into an image that it's transmitted to special goggles that he has in his cowl. So it's a huge technological enterprise.
And he was using everybody else's mobile phones as antennae.
Yeah. That was the idea. He was hacking.
And this was in the Dark Knight, right? So we're going back to the late 20th century.
Yep.
No wonder this is where Google and Facebook got their tracking ideas from, right?
Yeah. Yeah. There is kind of a problem with that approach. And that has to do with the fact that if you actually look at the movie, the image reconstruction that he gets has a very high resolution. It's very high fidelity. And in order to get that kind of resolution, you will need to emit sounds of very high frequency. And the problem is that typically cell phones do not emit sound in that frequencies. So he wouldn't be able to produce those maps. But that's just me being too geeky about it.
Oh, that's quite all right, Rodrigo. We always appreciate a bit of geek from the scientists in this particular segment.
Speak, knave.
Puzzler, this is Batman.
As I suspected, Caped Crusader, I'd like to exchange quotations with you, but time is money, so I'll just leave you with this thought. An aviator was carrying his clothes home from the cleaners when it began to rain. How didst he protect them?
Holy miracles, Batman. You got his number on your first try. Now, an aviator was carrying his clothes home from the cleaners when it began to rain. God, that's a tough one.
Yes, first a puzzle dealing with roosters, and now this.
Looks like we're flying blind, Batman.
The other thing I was thinking about in terms of sound, and this actually occurred to me the other day when I was umpiring in a cricket match, there was an incident where the ball went past the bat and I gave it as byes, which means the ball went past the bat, past the keeper, and they were able to scamper through for a run. And I gave it as byes. That means that it wasn't hit by anything. It just was missed by everybody, and they scored a run. The batter came up to me and said, "I hit that." And part of me thought, well, yeah, I bet you wouldn't have said that if you'd been caught behind. But the other part of me thought, well, maybe you did, but I couldn't hear anything. I honestly couldn't hear anything. But I do know my upper frequencies have been damaged by all my work as a broadcaster and listening to loud music over 55 years. And I thought, what if I had some device which meant I could hear things in real time so they weren't slowed down? Because, you know, you slow something down half speed and you can hear things that normally would be above your frequency range because they're now, the frequency is half what it was. Problem is, it's all moving at half speed, so you're going to fall behind the real action. But what if you had something that translated sound and gave you a signal that was within your hearable range? And then I would be able to hear a flick of a ball maybe hitting a bat as it went past, because now it was within my range. But it has to stay in real time. Can we do that, Rodrigo? Surely we can.
Yeah, that's totally doable. And what you're saying is exactly the same thing that you do with light when you're seeing infrared cameras, for instance. The human eye cannot actually see in the infrared portion of the spectrum. But you probably have seen security camera footage that looks kind of black and white or gray in gray tones. And that's because the electronics in that camera are better than your eye in sensing infrared light, and they can collect the light in the infrared portion of the spectrum. And then the only thing they do is when they show it to you, they shift the colors to something that your eye can actually pick up. So that's exactly what you're describing with sound, and it's something that it's totally doable.
We could transform the signals from their high frequency into a frequency which is within my hearing range, and I would now hear these things in my head. If I had a pair of headphones, that's reasonably easy, because I was thinking that's one way also that Batman could hear things way above normal frequency. He might have a couple of little headphones and he might have a special device which allows him to hear all that stuff which is normally outside the range of a human ear. Too far, the frequency is too high.
Yep, that's absolutely true. So that's something that is way within current technology and technology from, I don't know, the last 20 or 30 years. I guess the challenge for the newer version of Batman is to be able to translate those sounds into images. So the Dark Knight is much more sophisticated than that, because he's not only hearing the sound, he's actually reconstructing the sound into an image. So he's actually interpreting the effects of sound with his eyes. And that's the challenge.
Doesn't one incarnation of Batman develop a shark repellent spray?
Oh, yeah, that was absolutely amazing. That's the 60s one. That's Adam West.
This is before Happy Days jumped the shark.
Yeah, that was absolutely great. And it turns out that even though that was somewhat amusing and someone might find it funny, I think about 10 years ago, there was a few experiments that actually confirmed that you can get something like that. If you've ever watched The Mythbusters, they did an experiment in which they somehow get hand of what they called dead shark essence. which apparently it's a substance that sharks don't like. And what they did was they put this essence in a balloon and they went down the ocean to find a place where it was full of sharks. And they let some bait in them in the area, so the whole area would be full of sharks. And then they release the substance from the balloon, and you can see in the footage how all the sharks just go away really, really quickly, and they completely disappear from the scene. And I think it lasted like 10 or 15 minutes. So it's something that it's totally viable. I'm not sure how useful it would be, but yeah.
You'd have to flounder around with this balloon when you were swimming out there. And would it work underwater? I mean, it might work with the spray in the air, but what about, how can you spray something underwater? I mean, how can you spray water through water?
Well, in the Batman TV show, Batman was trying to get rid of a shark that was biting on his leg, and he uses a spray. There's actually a spray can that Robin passes from the helicopter, I think, and he sprays the shark. Yeah, that was really, really fun.
Robin does something useful.
Yeah, well, he saved his life.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Robin always needed to get helped out, you know. That was the one thing. Every time they had a Batman-Robin fighting scene, there'd be a bit where the bad guys would be starting to win, and it'd be especially a bit where Robin's in trouble and Batman has to come and help him. Remember that?
Yeah,
we used to go,
yeah, you're right.
Robin, you're useless, Robin.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But you're right at the same time, right? I would expect that kind of spray or solution or shark deterrent to be much more useful in the water than in the air, because how many times do you find a shark biting on you mid-air?
Yeah, unless you've watched the movie Sharknado.
Yeah, you're right. You're right there.
That's taking implausibility to a whole new level.
Yeah.
We could actually do a sci-fi sci-fact, be sci-fi sci-horror. The Batmobile. Now, it runs on atomic power, doesn't it? Or is it a jet-powered car?
I'm not quite sure. I don't think so. To be honest, I haven't actually picked up on what the fuel is on that one.
It looks like it. I guess when you look at it, because, you know, there's always a scene where they always have focus on the exhaust and off it would go at 78 speed out of the Batcave.
I think it would need to be some sort of combustion, right? It wouldn't be just nuclear power, because you don't have any kind of flame when you're doing nuclear reactions.
Yeah.
You have a lot of heat, but you don't have fire coming out of anywhere.
Are you aware of any jet-powered cars, Rodrigo?
Yes, I've seen a few of them in test drives in the desert. In I think it's Arizona desert. They even have competitions.
Oh yeah. There might even be the Great Salt Lake Basin in Utah, where they set all those speed records.
Yeah, and I think the challenging there is, again, well, that's where money is not the only thing you need. You need to be skillful when driving and being able to maneuver, right? Because having something that speed, it's probably difficult to control.
Yeah, I always thought one way of raising money for your local police force would be just to have a cop station outside the Batcave. Every time the Batmobile goes past, they clock them another ticket.
That's a very good idea.
Finally, the Batcave itself. As I said right at the start, you're going to have neighbours that will tolerate you having an atomic power station. But how plausible is it that you could have your own, if you had the money, your own atomic reactor and not really cause a lot of trouble for the people around you?
The thing is that you wouldn't need that much power, right? It's just to provide power to whatever mansion you have there and whatever you're doing in the cave. It's not in the cave. So it's not like powering a city. And you can get nuclear reactors with relatively high output power that are not huge. So if you think of, for instance, the rovers that you have in Mars, the last couple of rovers that landed there, those run on nuclear power. They're not solar. They're nukes. So the good thing about that one is that they can keep working at night. They don't have to recharge batteries, and they can keep going and going, regardless of the conditions.
Is that atomic power from a reactor or from radioactive decay?
It's a decay, yeah. It's a radioactive decay. So it's I think it's plutonium that they have, and the decay produces heat, and then that heat is transferred into electrical current. So you can have something like that, or you can have a nuclear power plant in which you're actually doing fission. Ideally, you would like to, if we can be wishful and have big wishful thinking, ideally you would like to have cold fusion, in which you would, instead of using fission, you would be using fusion, and the residue will be much, much more benign than anything that gets out of fission.
You don't have to send off a load of radioactive waste to the dump every now and then, possibly also in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
It sounds to me, however, that the Batcave atomic power reactor is a bit of an overkill. Even if he has this big mansion, and he's got stately Wayne Manor, he wouldn't need an atomic reactor to power that. And even if he's got some special stuff going on, like powering the Batmobile's batteries up or whatever, even then, his atomic reactor's overkill?
Yes, I think it would. There's no need why he wouldn't be able to source his energy from any electrical company. That being said, if he has specific spikes of consumption because of the experiments he's doing, he might want to keep that secret, and maybe that's one of the reasons why he would like to have his own energy source.
Or he's powering all his wealthy neighbours, and that's why they don't complain about the atomic power plant.
That's a very good point, yeah.
Don't kill me, man! I'm not going to kill you. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to tell all your friends about me.
What are you?
I'm Batman.
Okay, finally, Rodrigo, the big question, your favourite Batman?
My favourite Batman is Michael Keaton. It's the closest to reality, and it's probably the first movie I watched, so I'm kind of biased there, but Michael Keaton is the best one to me, yeah.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Sci-Fi Sci-Fact, hosted by me, Bryan Crump, produced by Andrew Robinson, and of course the whole thing is made possible by the incredible knowledge of those brilliant scientists at the McDiarmid Institute. You can find more episodes of Sci-Fi Sci-Fact on the RNZ Podcasts page. RNZ's podcasts are also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify and iHeartRadio, or just about anywhere where you find your podcasts. And if you don't want to miss new episodes, well, make sure you follow us.